Hey, hello, Dr.
Hello.
Roy. How are you?
Hi, Mohammed. Hi, Damien. I'm doing well. Thank you
Hi.
for asking. How are you, gentlemen?
All good. Hi, Pratik. How
Good.
good? Hi, Moment. All fine. So excited to be here.
Yeah,
Likewise. Thank you for
that,
having me.
that's our pleasure. Honestly, this topic is very interesting for me. Data is everything now for AI and for anything. It's really the fuel of whatever innovation we're trying to do for businesses, even for our implementations.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
you're a very data avert. all projects that are related to data, I know him. He gets excited, and he
Yeah.
absolutely wants to do them. So yeah, I think it will be very insightful, Pratik, your inputs, and so yeah, very excited. And yeah, I think there's a misconception often. Like we say, oh, we use AI. Like even with ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, it's very convenient for anybody to use it. But there's a when we start to implementing it all this in solutions in businesses, there's one word, which is no data, no AI. Like as simple
Absolutely.
as that. And so that's why yeah, I'm looking forward to your yeah, your inputs. It will be very insightful.
Yeah, looking forward to sharing as much as I can on this field. Yeah.
Good, good. Okay, let's start to just give our audience a brief introduction about you, Dr. Roy. Dr. Roy is a visionary leader in the data solutions and AI-driven innovation. Currently, he's serving as a at product director at Springs Nature, with over a decade of experience in developing data solutions and ethical AI practices. That's very important. Dr. Roy specialized in transforming high quality data sets into actionable insights for AI and machine learning applications. Thank you, Dr. Roy, for being with us. Would you like to share more details about your background with our audience before we start?
Yeah, a pleasure. Again, thank you for having me here. Really excited to, speak to the both of you as well as discuss this topic. I think it's very much the hot dish of the season, so to speak. But I think this season is probably going to last quite some time, rather than being just one flavor that goes over a season and then disappears forever. Yeah, with respect to data as a service and my background, so I am a scientist by training. I actually did my PhD in chemistry, specialized in nanotechnology and material science. Worked quite a lot in various countries. I was in Taiwan for a very long time. There, I was focused around semiconductors largely. As you know, most of the semiconductor chips today from TSMC and Foxconn and various other places that go into your phones and laptops and whatnot. Come from Taiwan. There's a lot of R&D there, which brought me to that place. So I worked there for a bit and then moved to New Zealand. I was invested in, again, a slightly different industry, but mostly around photovoltaic solar cells and actually figuring out how to reduce or create materials that would reduce drag for shuttles that would take off into space. So we had a private partnership. So quite a lot of things in the R&D space, which kind of got me into the whole data thing, right? I mean, as a scientist, the key part of it is research and generating data that is reliable, reproducible, and can be authenticated by others. As the saying goes, right? Garbage in, garbage out, as everyone is familiar with. So it's important to make sure that you have the right data sets. And it was around that time I kind of started navigating outside of the R&D space and diving a little bit more into the computational space, moving into the product management world. Having played around with data for quite some time, and that brought me to Springer Nature, which is one of the largest R&D publishers in the world. So it goes back over 180 years. Einstein used to be one of Springer Nature's first customers. We have a lot of R&D related scientific publications, journals, books, and so on. I think it's fair to say pretty much most of the Nobel laureates tend to publish with us with respect to the original works. So there's a lot of information across a wide variety of fields. And what I do specifically is I'm in charge of two things within Springer Nature. The first one being that since we have a lot of data, all of that needs to be made available in machine readable format, so that external organizations can then utilize those data sets for various purposes, which I'm sure we'll touch upon over the course of this discussion.
Yeah.
So I have a team that is largely meant, comprised of product managers, developers. I work with the director of data science themselves. And the other one is, of course, I also work with the commercial teams with respect to monetization of content. So there we'll touch upon licensing, what I see in terms of industry trends and so on. So that in a very short gist is my background. I would probably add a disclaimer before moving anytime ahead, which I have to, is all the opinions that I share here are mine and not that of my employer. So with that out of the way, back to you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Great.
Prathik.
That's an impressive background, and a lot of things that are definitely affecting our main topic now, which is data. Data is the main fuel of AI now. Without data, we cannot have the AI work, and that's, I think this is very promoting for the data as a service model. It was there many years ago, but it was not that solid or not that required as we speak now, to avoid having to have the license access for data to train our models, to private models, business models internally, without relying on just the cloud AI. And that's another trend now. But how do you think, and how can you explain for us and for the audience, how do you see the data as a service and its role in implementing and enabling the AI development?
Sure. I think to answer that question, we probably need to step back a little bit and go back to the days almost when things were getting digitized, from traditional books to the internet platform, and then making information available via the internet and various platforms, and so on and so forth. So previously, when it came to information, you would have to go to the library, right? If you wanted to access that information, read through it, and so on.
Before.
Long time, that kind of tells you how old some of us are, right? Like libraries, who goes there these days? But I do encourage everyone.
Yeah, and like we see sometimes in the movie, like where they're going to libraries, like putting in a in a box to see like what was written to get out the data from some books. Like we see that
Exactly.
approach.
Exactly. No. I think it's nonetheless, I should probably take the time out to say that please support your local libraries. It's very important. It's a treasure of knowledge, and especially those who are younger should definitely make the point to kind of go back and read books if possible. But yes, I digress. So the transition happened from, you would go to a library, read those books, to platforms being available where those books were getting digitized. There was a famous case, actually, and this is known as text and data mining. If you're familiar with that, what happens is, if you're digitizing content to be made available in a different format, Google Books is quite popular. And what they did was they started digitizing a lot of the content to be made available in different places for people to read through. There was a famous case around that. Everybody can Google it, but suffice to say that there are some copyright laws associated with how books can then be digitized by various industries. But that was like the first instance of text and data mining, taking content and transforming it into a different format, so to speak. So from physical to digital, and that process being text and data mining kind of really kick-started things. And other publishers started taking note. So this includes both publishers that publish more on like fiction and non-fiction. So some of the largest publishers that you can think of, Penguin, Random House, and others that come to our mind, Macmillan, and so on and so forth. But then there are also R&D publishers like Springer Nature, Elsevier, Wiley. There are many of them that are available across the world that produce a lot of ebooks as well as journals, which were then digitized. So that's the other part of the equation. So the data as a service model really started, I would say, about 10 years ago or about 15 years ago. One of the first industries that matured in that space was the finance industry, where we are all used to things like credit card transactions. Like, how do you connect the dots between, what code is being applied to a specific transaction, and then can you mine that data to, have targeted ads for that person? So in the finance industry, that is quite popular. As far as licensing is concerned, the music industry was actually one of the first ones to really start monetizing information around data as a service, where, of course, everybody famously is aware of Napster, when what happened with Napster. But that really brought into the subscription space of things like iTunes and Apple Music and so on and so forth. So when we think of data as a service, I think the first thing that we ought to think of is not of training models, but the entire industry as to how data was means that there are various other types of data that could be used in platforms. So that was the first case. Thereafter, the market started maturing, where beyond the finance and the music industry, other industries started taking note. And here we'll get in a little bit more deeper into the trenches of data as a service. So take, for instance, the pharmaceutical industry or life science industry, or even semiconductors for that matter. There are a wide variety of use cases. So in these types of industries, they're often looking for information like clinical trials, or patent data that might be available, right? Or if you're looking at original research and development journals like the ones that we produce, you might be looking for information in terms of perhaps a original research is talking about obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and another perhaps patent is talking about somebody creating a method to identify different levels of glutamate in a body. I'm just making things up as I go along. So text and data mining, if a pharmaceutical industry were to pick up both of those data sets, then they might be able to connect the dots. Oh, wait, you know what? OCD, if you have OCD, you're likely to show these symptoms. And if you have increase in glutamate levels in your body, these are the kind of symptoms that might be displayed. So could they possibly be connected, like increase in glutamate levels to the possibility of someone having OCD? So this is one way, for instance, text and data mining connects the dots. Now, coming to data as a service, these are two disparate data sources. One is hidden in patents, one is hidden in research articles, and there might be something else hidden somewhere else. How do you get access to that?
How do you gather, or
how do you exactly gather all of that information? Because now if you want to go ahead and train a model to connect those dots, you need to acquire those data sets. And that is how data as a service started really transforming itself into this model where companies started figuring out, oh, you know what, we have this treasure trove of data. Why don't I figure out how to make this data available to external organizations? And then either they could do some of the work themselves or hand it over to them such that they can start training those models and so on and so forth. So that's where the other parts come in, which I'm sure we'll touch upon, licensing and monetization and so on. But I can also, happy to share about some interesting use cases that I've seen over the years in data as a service.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very clear. As we say, like we were even saying in the digital transformation, like data is the black gold.
Yes.
Yeah. And what I like when you did in the intro, I'm getting back a little bit what you said, like in your job and what you're doing now as a director of data solutions, is to gather all these different kind of jobs with the engineers, developers, but also on the business side, how to reuse this data to monetize, how to market these data, because these data are, Mohammed knows this very well, like for the marketing purposes, data are, you need them like for marketing, and then also on the sales process and all that. So it involves all the different kind of jobs, I would say. So that's very, very relevant and very clear now how you explained it. Thanks, Prathik. Yes. And now we faced it like also same thing. And I always compare almost like the digital transformation era was now the AI transformation era, and we knew, because we all worked in it, we knew that a clean data set, or the quality of data set, will have an impact. How you part them and all that will have an impact on the results, basically. Right. And now, how do you think this quality? Do we need, because at the time we needed like a high level quality before, because otherwise it was very, how does it change with AI? Do we need a less high level of quality and the AI does the thing, or how do you see that, like the level of the quality?
So my perspective in this is obviously with anything in life, the higher the quality, higher the results, or better the results, so to speak. But there might be different types of, again, use cases where you might not need as much high quality data as required. So let's say, for instance, LLMs are very popular at the moment. And for those of you who are listening in, of course, large language models, small language models, typically, let's say if someone wants to train a large language model for the purposes of, informing doctors how a particular field or what kind of research might. I give you the example of OCD and glutamate, for instance. Here you want high quality data that is reproducible, that is dependable, right? So you don't want to be scouring the internet and reading somebody's blog post and then sending your bot over to scrape that information and use that to train your data, because who knows what's in that blog post, whether that's actually verified as research or not. So opinions don't count as research for the purposes of research and development. You need legitimate, verifiable, reproducible data that will allow you to then feed that into a model such that you can then go on to train the model and generate those outputs. On the other hand, let's say the other type of AI technology that often gets used in conjunction with LLMs is RAG, these days, retrieval augmented generation. Right. So in that case, there might be certain use cases where you are perhaps only pointing towards a certain type of data, where you might be using it for summarization. So famously, for instance, there is a very large tech company today, and you might be using their phones, for instance. It has access to a lot of popular news media, and it is summarizing it for your notifications, and sometimes it gets the notifications incorrect. In a sense, the summaries might be generated in a manner that is not quite reflective of the original content. So because it is at the end of the day summarizing based on a model. So here the quality of the data set is important, but what is more important is how you are able to summarize it in a reasonable manner. But let's say it's not going to be a life and death scenario where if you end up saying something incorrectly, other than possibility of getting sued perhaps. So it depends. But overall, I would say high quality data is extremely important when it comes to accessing and training models.
Inside the model. What I see as a simple example where I see where it's slightly different now with AI is for example, you have a data set of let's say a Excel sheet of data set of data, and you need to, for example, take it and re-import it in a specific tool, let's say a CRM. This is more our space. And if you took that data set raw, the CRM will not read it correctly, or for example, he will not read the commas or do the calculation. There could be some stuff that doesn't work. The good thing with the AI, and then before on digital transformation, we had to almost do it manually, go back, do some macros to change it.
Right.
Now you just import it in whatever AI model in it and just say, okay, change me for this and this.
Right.
And you don't need a bunch of engineers or whatever, and he does the job, and then you can report. So I think that's where AI can also
absolutely.
And then you have to train the model of the data set. But this is just an example where the AI helps it goes faster on parsing the data. I think.
Correct. And that's a great example that you shared, Damien, because I think that is a low hanging fruit, right? Where you and where AI could be genuinely useful. Cleaning up information, use it for business intelligence, use it in CRM, using it in these types of places. Also, I mean, it would be incorrect for me to say there's not a whole lot of stake there, at stake there. But let's just say that the other examples that I shared, you don't want to be missing out on a zero in the scientific field, especially if it's in relation to health. So there you need to make sure that when you're using AI, it really ensures could you benefit from having a human in the loop, so to speak. So I think in certain fields you need to have the human in the loop. In other fields, you can go about it in a way such that AI can be a real transformer in this digitalization world here.
Yeah. Interesting. Before we move to the next point, I just need to remind our audience, please feel free to add your question or comments in the comments wherever you're seeing our live. Okay. For you covered the part of how data should be clean, but we have seen this for multiple clients. They might have great ideas, great products they need to build, but still not everyone understand how the data or the data sets, if it's available or not available, might drive the application development, the AI powered or based applications. From your experience in whatever industry you have this experience, how do you think and C, the data sets can drive AI application development.
Oh, I mean, it is, I would say, the other side of the coin, right? Data and AI go hand in hand. So it's very important. And I mean, AI is not going to survive without data. Forget about good quality data. If you're not going to have data, then you're not going to have AI. So, let's again go back. It differs from the industry. Like, for example, in the scientific or in the research and development world, so to speak, you have different ways of acquiring data. You can go about it more often than not. R&D sites will have a developers portal where you can go and learn a little bit more about what kind of data is being offered, can it be licensed, and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you are working with clinical trials, there is, the US government has a website called clinicaltrials.gov, where you can actually go and acquire those clinical trial information. There's the USPTO website, which is not the best website in the world, but it's a very useful website and adds a lot of value for those who are searching for information. So you can get patent-related information from there. So in those cases, it really depends on the kind of data that you're trying to acquire, and depends on how that data is, or how much of the data is actually machine readable. So there, we often use the word fair, right? Findable, accessible, interoperable, reproducible. So R kind of gets a little change around every now and then from my experience. But anyway, so I mean, these being the four principles, so to speak. So I think no matter which industry you go to, as long as you're able to easily find those data sets, how accessible is it for you to then acquire those data sets? Is it easily interoperable with the kind of systems such that it will integrate with your workflows, with your tools? Maybe they offer an API, maybe they offer a data feed to access that content, access the data, and then how reproducible it is. So that's why I said R is probably depends on the industry. I mean, obviously, I would like for it to be in the scientific R&D world to be as reproducible as possible, because then that's how good AI models work. So I think absolutely it's a very critical component to go out there and then find and access those data sets. There's also another angle to this. I'll share an interesting use case with you. So not that long ago, a company in the medical field was looking for images of hands. And I was trying to figure out, wait, why are you looking for images of hands? They were like, no, can you get me all the images of hands that you have in original research? And I'm like, why? So it's like, oh no, we are actually working on skin cancer. So, and it's fascinating because they were like, most of the images of hands available to train their algorithms, the AI models, are not very, let's say, diverse in terms of representing various skin tones. So, and this is also important. Like, let's say, at the end of the day, there's a commercial angle to this as well, right? So, let's say you're a company in the pharmaceutical world. You obviously want to be able to sell your drugs or your treatment to as many people as possible. So it's also in your interest to gather data that is as widely represented as possible, so that you can make your treatments available to as many users, which is both useful from a health perspective because it benefits the entire world, but also useful from a commerce perspective. So I think both these angles are important when it comes to not just reproducibility, but in terms of how useful that data set actually is for that particular use case.
Yeah, like when you talked about the hands, I think there's two. I don't know if you confirm, but there's two pain points in the for computer science for having data. They have two struggle and bottlenecks, which is the data of the hands, because the models, the AI models, are lacking of hand, and the feet, to make that can be applied for medical stuff, and even to generate images and all that. That's the two, because they're lacking of human data sets for these two specific things, which is an issue in the computer science. There's not enough data to replicate correctly hands, feet on AI, or we use it for health, basically.
Yes.
That's a thing. Yeah. And going to data sets, can you tell us more? We're going into your work at Springer. I know you guys developed a CGraph, which is a huge one of the largest open access data set, and how it contributes to AI. If you can tell us more about this solution.
Yeah, so I mean, people much more cleverer than me were responsible for developing SciGraph at Springer Nature. So that was a fabulous work that those who kind of made it. What SciGraph essentially did was, and I said essentially did in the past tense because we have in the recent past actually retired SciGraph because we're also moving into other things, and I'll get into it in just a moment. But so what SciGraph was actually one of the largest open data sets graphs in the world that had information related to full text from research articles, metadata, things like information around who's publishing, what are their affiliations, who's the funder for that particular research. You might also want to know if a study on lung cancer has actually been funded by a nicotine company, perhaps. So there might be a conflict of interest. So things like that. So what SciGraph essentially did was have a combination of all of this information in a graph, such that, and it was made available so that anyone could use it for different types of use cases. You might have heard of the Human Brain Project, for instance. It was more than, I think, €1 billion that was started in 2013, if I remember correctly, in the EU. That was they used SciGraph for quite some time. And similarly, there are these types of open data sets that are available, where it connects the dots between original research, patents, clinical trials, metadata information, as I mentioned, for different types of use cases. One of the other use cases which I see now, and I know that SciGraph was also quite useful there, and the kind of direction that we are moving towards, so I'll segue into that in just a moment, is that semiconductor industry. The industry that I kind of worked with, my experience in R&D, often we have seen that those who actually utilize AI when it comes to chip manufacturing have a higher, I think the study says it's about the rate of success when it comes to chips that are actually that goes into production after the R&D process. You have a nearly 10% higher success rate in the manufacturing process for those who are actually using AI models versus those who are not, or who have advanced.
When we know the quantities in that industry, 10%
is a huge number. Yeah, exactly. Yes,
a huge number at the end, like in million. I don't know, maybe in more.
Oh, it's in billions.
Billions.
Absolutely, yeah, and especially as the semiconductor industry has evolved, it's often looking for new types of materials. Right? How do you increase the efficiency of the production of these chips? How do you fit in more transistors into these chips? Could you change from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional? Things like lithography and so on that goes into manufacturing of these chips. So even there, the production process is often looking at information from these open data sets such as SciGraph. And what we have done in the recent past is we are actually one of the largest open access publishers in the world. So what that means is we make a lot of our content available. It's almost, well, it isn't the exact equivalent of open source code, but you can kind of think of it in that lines. There are various licenses attached to it in terms of whether you should be attributing, whether it can be used, it should only be used non-commercially, whether you can create derivatives or not. But we have that content available such that others, especially in the R&D field, can use it for these types of purposes.
Wow. So you mean like the data on SciGraph are available, right? Are publicly available.
So you can actually go to our developers portal and sign up for an API key as of right now and have access for it for non-commercial research purposes. So
Interesting.
We'll have to didn't have time to check before, honestly, but now I'll go after.
And
I think you have a room in
absolutely, and there are. I mean, we're not the only ones. There are others in the publishing industry, in other industries that have open source data sets, which is why I said that the FAIR data comes into play, right? How do you access those data? Another government organization that I highly recommend everyone to see is NISO, the National Institute of Standards organization. The US does some fabulous work when it comes to standards and information that is available. In fact, the format that we follow in terms of we want to make our content as non-proprietary as possible for machine readability, right? So that was also one of the crux of SciGraph. And similarly, from there onwards, what we built was to make sure that we follow a non-proprietary format. So there we use a format called JATS XML, which is what was originally developed by the National Institute of Health. So we want to make it as easy as possible for others to then use it for different purposes. Of course, there are two other angles to it, as I mentioned previously. Whether you use it for non-commercially or commercially or research or otherwise, you still want to ask for consent. You still want to see if there's a license involved and other parts to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very insightful, and as you know, I'm not 100% sure this point all the people now are asking, and even you get this question 100% regarding the ethical part and data privacy. That's the first question we get from our B2B clients, how ethical this AI can be, and how we can protect our internal data, internal policy, how it could be securing our internal confidential kind of details. What do you think of this aspect? How can this kind of ethical and privacy part could be managed in the AI area?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I work a fair bit, in that space. Uh, there's a lot to unpack here, and I can go on for hours around this, but I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I'd say think of it as two different parts. The first one being when you're ethical uh, acquiring of data, right? So everyone here in the AI field might have at least heard once at least, I'm sure everybody has heard of fair use. But I'm not entirely sure when people talk about fair use, have they gone in and read what fair use is? What are the four principles of fair use? So when fair use came into play, and again, I'd connect the dots with the ethical acquiring of data and why it's important is first one is what is the purpose and the character of the data, which in the sense that is the data that you're trying to acquire and use it for, is it commercial or non-commercial or for research purposes, right? The second one is the nature of the copyright use. So are you using the data that is an autobiography or someone that you intend to quote perhaps, or use it in a different manner? So in that case, it's non-fiction. Can it be used in a particular way, or if it's like for example CRM and business intelligence, as you said, for instance, there are GDPR constraints, there are various constraints what you should and should not acquire. It's very important to always check with respect to privacy and play within the rules. It's important. So then the third one is the substantial portion of the data. Like say for instance you are trying to acquire data that happens and then use it in a model that is a book perhaps. And what is allowed, and I'm not a legal expert, so those who have experience there and are professionals should probably be weighing in and not me, but my opinion here is, my understanding of it is that you can take certain portions of a book, but you can't take the entire book and then regurgitate that for training into a model and then using it in a different type of work. So if you want to be able to do that, then you license the book, because at the end of the day, there is another aspect to this, which is, look, if you are in the business of training AI models and utilizing AI, it's also in your own interest that the other side of the industry thrives, that those who are actually creators and creating the data, they are also paid. They have because imagine if you don't have any data, like we have established, then you're not going to
value. Yeah,
exactly. So
good data, no AI. Yeah,
you want to be able to incentivize those who are also creating the information, right? Which is often the case if you look at industries like the creative industries, those who photographers, those who work with videos.
But your thing made me think of the issue we had with the music industry when Spotify
Exactly.
and after there was like, but how do you're using our data? Music equals data.
Yeah.
How do you like the different model? And there was a big mess at the time at the beginning of Spotify when it started to really work. It was a mess. Like the music industry got shaked on the business model It was not
Yes.
we buy a CD. Yeah, it was CD. A CD. Yeah, I don't remember. Like we buy a CD now. It was virtual, and they were on streaming, and they were not paid, but they
Right.
needed their data to have amazing platforms. So
Absolutely.
we're talking
Absolutely.
about the same issue, but in more industries now, it's going to be.
Absolutely, and which actually is the perfect segue into the fourth thing of the fair use principle, which is the market value of the use case. So if you're going to take the data and then commercialize it, that in the sense that it hurts the creator and doesn't really benefit them, then there could be an angle there where case to be made, and that's not really fair use, right? It's not fair at all. So yeah, you're right, Damien. Absolutely, I think like that's why I said that it's in the interest of everybody, because you want a thriving ecosystem
Yeah.
because eventually if only one side benefits, then the ecosystem breaks down after a point of time. So then it's nobody. You want to achieve AGI, you want to have access to high quality data, people to continue creating more data. I think it's wonderful where we are today, where some of the large language models are able to think. There's deep research involved and showcase those research. But maybe I'll be proven wrong 2 years from now. There will be a Nobel Prize for an AI model. I know Demis Hassabis won for DeepMind, for instance, in the recent past. But the point being that all of that AI model has actually been trained on the work done by humans in the laboratories. So if that didn't work, if you didn't spend thousands and thousands and millions of hours doing that work, that AI model today would not have existed. So that's the point I'm trying to make, wherein in order for that ecosystem to thrive, you need both parts to function well, a market to function well.
Yeah, no, very
Yeah.
clear. It was very, very tough. And we have like we have the cases like with how to treat it's also even if you want to use AI internally, like how the data of the own company, is it patent? Is it like how do they want to? And they're scared to put it in external model. So that's why you talked about it before, like using RAG system that goes in and to protect a little bit of internal data because they don't want it out on the open models sources.
Yes, and so just two other points. I promised to keep it brief, which I did not. But to answer Mohammed's question, I think the ethical part is an important component of all of this. Is the kind of use case where, for instance, a large automobile company was found giving away data sets of people driving and their behavior to insurance companies so that they could modify their algorithms to charge you more as your insurance premiums. So I think that ethical component comes in there as well. Like, what are you giving up? So again, there are different. Like, you as a user, you should always know what data. At least make an effort. I'm not saying go through the 50 pages of terms and conditions that you're signing over. I don't think anybody does. Perhaps a use case for AI, right? I think nowadays AI can help you filter through a terms and conditions and tell you what you're signing over or not. But understand what you're giving over. And as a company, how are you using the data and who you're making that available to, and so on and so forth. So that's the other part of ethics that I would say in terms of how you use AI, and is it being used in a manner that is preserving the sanctity of the original user. And finally, the other, privacy internally. How do you make sure that your data, and this is a little more rudimentary. I'm sure the experts and those who view are perhaps very knowledgeable in this field. But I would say the key thing right now is when you're using a large language model, you're using a public facing system today, where you obviously should not ideally be inputting your private data sets, your proprietary information within your company in a public facing large language model, such that the data goes into the mothership, so to speak, and then train itself on that data. So there are now cloud hosted 0-day retention policy based AI models available that you can host securely on an Azure server, for instance, or elsewhere. So there are ways. So if you're an enterprise company, I would highly encourage you to then go out and make sure that when you use these models, you get a secure, privately hosted version of that, such that if you want to play around with something, you're playing around with that versus, say, using a public-facing system. Because who knows, even a non-profit focused public-facing system tomorrow could have an arm that is focused on profit. So,
yeah, and it goes I think it goes directly back to what we wanted to ask you is like, and we talked a little bit about it, like it loops everything, like you need data to do your AI, and it opens model we had before, which moves the business model about licensing. How
Yes.
do you like, and especially what are the free of use, why and what kind of industries, and also what's copyrighted to be used inside the AI, which give a huge output in the value on the business, but who on this value chain, as you were saying, like not you're using, so not the one that are creating them don't leave, is not left behind. So what's your thought about like or examples on licensing, the business model around that, all that? How do you see it? How it starts working? Because we're at something new right now, like on
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah. So again, I go back to the music industry. I think music industry has been amazing in terms of setting the
yeah,
trends for licensing. I've always maintained that often what you see happening in the music industry today is what you will see 5 years down the line in other industries. So especially when it comes to licensing. So it's if you're in that field, it's worth looking at how they're monetizing, how they are licensing content in the music industry. But with respect to licensing and monetization, you're right, I mean, this is a burgeoning field, a nascent field, but we've already started to see a few different trends. So, for instance, there are these data marketplaces today, like some of the larger players being Snowflake, Databricks, and so on. So one way you could monetize data is, if you of course own the data, you can have it available in a marketplace. If that's meant for CRM, business intelligence, for pharma, life sciences, whatever it is, you could have it in a marketplace such that you're only paying a licensing fee to the marketplace
yeah,
to use the marketplace, and then the other user pays for compute and then using it in various different ways. Your license can tell what kind of use cases are allowed and what kind of use cases are prohibited. So that's like the easiest way to do it. Let's say if you don't have your own infrastructure, but let's say you have an infrastructure where you can support data as a service. What kind of monetization and licensing models could you use? So one is, the easiest way to do it is to have a data feed, which is basically use an enterprise version of one of the cloud services or support the cloud services, like whether it's an S3 bucket or Azure or whatever it is. Take your data and just dump it into one of the cloud services, so to speak, of the other person. Or if that's, I don't think it's hard anymore to do that. But if it is, then you could even just use an FTP server. Use a very, very old school username password kind of thing. I'm not sure how many people do it, but people, I know of industries that still use an FTP server to support data feeds. I'll come to the licensing and the monetization part in just a bit. With the other possibility is, if you can invest a little bit more in your infrastructure, can you now make your information available to support machine readable format? So let's say if you're in books, could you make it available in bits XML? Could you make it available as an EPUB, and so on? So first is the transformation of the format such that it is machine compatible. The second one is, can you make that available via APIs? Which then opens up the monetization possibilities, because once you have an API, you can have several different ways of monetizing, right? You can use a traditional usage-based model, which is okay, the number of calls that are being made into your APIs to pull information. You could go about, perhaps even more deeper. For instance, let's say one API call pulls in multiple data sets. So then you don't monetize it based on the number of calls you're making. You monetize it on a per unit basis of the number of units being pulled per API call. And then you can have several different tiers to go about it. So let's say you have 5 different tiers where you say one API call can pull up to 20 results, whatever those results may be, 20 data sets. You price it based on the number of data sets being delivered as part of that equation. So that could be another monetization strategy. There's, of course, you can enter into partnerships for revenue sharing and so on and so forth. But the last bit is licensing, which is here is the other component. What if your data is publicly available anyways? It's freely available. you're essentially scouring freely available data and you're scraping it. Maybe you're adding some value to it, you're enriching it, and
Yeah.
you're making it available. One can always make the case for, oh, you know what, I can go out. Let's say, for instance, press releases. If you are a finance company and you're perhaps trying to look at press releases to find hidden information in there, or information that gives you ideas of trends.
Yeah.
That's publicly available information.
Yeah, all the press release. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, it's available. Yeah.
Right. So how do you build a monetization model for that? Again, so here the value needs to be, you then collect all the press releases. You could perhaps enrich the information wherein
Analyze them, and then
under,
the outcome is something paid or monetized. Like
exactly. So you could perhaps use it to connect it to the ticker of the stock market based on the companies that are mentioned there, and then you add value and monetize it from there. But if it is paid, then like if the data that you have is proprietary, that you own, or perhaps you have a license for to sub-license, then you can go about it in slightly different ways, where you can say, you know what, based on the use case, you are allowed this one particular use case. Let's say you only want to summarize information, then that's a use case. Perhaps you want to extract, I don't know, drug information from medical papers. That is a use case. Maybe you broaden the use case further, where you say you can use it to extract information around drug symptoms, and then create a platform altogether. And then perhaps you say, hey, here's an add-on where you also now have the rights to train a model, but it's going to cost you 15% extra, 20% extra, for the license to do that. So you can break your licenses down based on use cases on top of the data that you're supplying. So the value chain, so to speak, is first is the data, then on top of that is enriched or extracted data, and on top of that, the use cases. So therefore, you can continue adding value, and you can license based on that and monetize based on that. Yeah.
And as you were saying, we can see, as you were talking, there's a full value chain that's coming in. Like where are you? Like there can be businesses that comes in at different part of this value chain, but we're seeing like this whole value chain coming in to monetize all that, use the models, use AI, because AI can be used a different way on a data set, and AI can be used on another way on the same data set. Absolutely. And basically that's how you start monetize and all. Yeah, I think it's everything, the landscape is starting. It's as you were saying, like it's new. I saw like AI was not during the gold rush. The ones that were making most money were not the one getting gold, but the one making the tools. These are These are the ones that got more money than the workers on the gold. So here it's kind of the same thing. What will you get out? What will you build about on these AI things? And that's exactly what we're saying. Everything is possible now.
Everything is possible, and I'm still, as someone who's kind of been on both sides of the fence, as someone who's done the work to create the data, and as someone who is now responsible for aggregating, curating the data, and making it available, and working with teams that would commercialize the data. Like I said, for an ecosystem to thrive, I think it's important for both sides to make sure that you follow the policies, you make an effort to understand what you can and cannot do with the data. Often startup companies, for instance, they're pressed for resources. They might not have a legal team. So you can still go out there and get consultants or legal members to help you out to understand what the terms and conditions of a data license is, what you can and cannot do with it. Ask those questions. And similarly, it's also important if you are on the other side where you're making data available for monetization, you try and understand what the use case is, and you point them towards the most relevant data. Or if you don't have it, you let them know and point them in a different direction, and so on and so forth. So an honest, transparent conversation goes a long way here.
Yeah, I think the AI comes to this world to be an eye opener for a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of companies have data like social media, like telecom operators, like many things. They were not utilized using this data in proper way, and now it's the time that they can think on how they can make much more profits and much more usage of this data. And I think this brings to in my mind, I guess this could be a very attractive business model for AI developers. It's not the main objective now to get the data. It could be like, as you said, we can build some partnerships with data providers and we grow together. I can build AI model and the LLM model, very strong algorithm, very strong in the brain of the system itself, but it can fit into data from multiple sources, and they can plug in their data and resell it within the main AI model.
Correct. Yes, absolutely, Mohammed. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of this being while it might not be the most substantial revenue stream you're generating in the near future, I think increasingly this will become a key revenue stream for most companies, where you're probably already sitting on a treasure trove of information. And how do you figure out different ways to make that data available for research, non-research, non-commercial, or commercial purposes? I think part of that kind of overlaps with governance, with privacy, with ethics, figuring out who owns the data. All of those things come into play. So if companies start investing in those areas now, there's a lot of things that you could do if you start partnering with companies in the CRM space, in the business intelligence space, and learn from that expertise. Yeah, 100% agree with you, Mohammed. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
And to a little bit we covered a lot. I think the talk can last for a for a long time, especially on topics like as you were saying, me, what I like is the licensing part, partnership, all this kind of way. We can have a endless talk, but to finish on one of the last, because we're the time is running. It's just what you see as a visionary on what you're doing, the future trend on data as a service. How do you see the future of that?
Yeah, so for me, I think what Mohammed mentioned in terms of the last bit around this being a nice revenue stream. So from a data vendor's point of view, I would say that most companies, if you have already not started thinking about this, you should be thinking about this in terms of finding out from your data science teams, if you have one, or those who are specializing in data within your company. What do you own? Is there a way for you to offer data outside of your platforms? We always talk about platforms. Could data be offered as a service, as a product on its own? So for there, and then once you start having that conversation, you can start talking about governance and licensing and monetization and so on and so forth. So maybe you start with a small pilot, but that's where I see the trend going. Large enterprise companies are already doing it. But I think mid-size and small-size companies perhaps could add value to something where, if they don't own data today, can they acquire information, extract information, and then enrich information and add the value, as we spoke about, Damien. That. So that's the trend that I see for smaller, mid-sized companies, moving in this direction. As far as if you're on the other side of the spectrum, you are a large company or a mid-sized company, looking to acquire data for your own AI models, then that is another trend that I'm increasingly seeing, which I think is a positive trend, that they are now starting to reach out to companies that own the data to say, hey, you know what, this is my use case. This is what I'd like to do. Let me know, we'll work with you, we'll partner with you, where we might offer you access to the models, or we might offer you XYZ. Could we have access to your data? Could we work on something together? So I think partnerships in this space will start to increase more and more, and with vendors and AI companies and other places. So that's the trend that I see kind of moving towards. And I'm an optimist, so I'd like to believe that we will have a world where everyone is thriving when it comes to creators,
collaborating,
as well as collaborating, and the AI models become more and more sophisticated, and it goes on to help real world problems, solve cancer and increase your car's performance, and who knows, you have a supercomputer in your hand soon enough. Yeah. So.
I think it will come. Great.
Yeah. That's great. Yani this conversation is very eye opener for both even the data providers, the data industry on its own. Beside having this as the engine of the AI, I think this might reflect in on multiple aspects, multiple industries, multiple technologies. Might the blockchain or NFTs could be playing a very good part to protect the ownership of any kind of digital copies of data. I think that's the time that like the AI comes to the world to give like refreshing or bringing some technologies to life, if we can say.
Blockchain is back.
Chain is back. Yeah, it feels like we've gone back 5 years.
Really fun,
But
man.
I like the point that Mohammed is making, which we actually did not touch upon, and I know we are out of time. But essentially, how do you trace the data, right? Like, where is it actually going into? Is attributions being provided in terms of like the model that might be generating an output? So traceability of data is also an important consideration where different technologies could have a role to play, including blockchain. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's where we didn't. Yeah, a very good point. It can be another big talk. Yeah, how the blockchain, yeah, will come because you can trace, you can put in the model. How that can be one of the future trends, like the blockchain and the AI, or how they will work together
Yeah.
in the implementation. Because we know that if even if you believe in the in crypto or whatever, different the blockchain is different. The
Yeah.
technology of itself, and the technology, it's one of the unviolable, safe, more secure system invented in the whole
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
life
I
of.
think it's important to take crypto away from blockchain
Yeah,
because
yeah,
crypto
exactly.
gets a lot of bad
But
name,
people,
and
but
people,
people,
malign
which is
blockchain
different.
because
That's
of
why
that.
we need to
Yeah,
raise, because sometimes people just blockchain equals no. Blockchain is
yeah.
just not for crypto. It can be used for a lot of other
Other
stuff.
things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
For the smart contract, but it can be used in how it can be merged in data. That's a big topic. Big
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would like to thank you, Dr. Roy, for this very exciting, very insightful. I learned a lot from the thoughts and insights you shared, and I think the same for the audience. Thank you so much for being with us in this episode. Hope I think it's a door opener as well for another topics. You know, data is there everywhere. I think we need to dig deeper in multiple topics. We can plan for this for with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Pratik.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.
Looking forward to being back again someday.
Oh yeah, we'll
Yeah.
keep you for sure. We have a lot to tackle.
Thank you, our audience.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye, everyone.